This month's workshop topic is the DDM action server is for generating neutral file formats. The topics that we're going to cover, in fact if I go straight to the project this way, the topics that we will cover is the on CAD save generation of neutral file formats, which is what people are probably using today, as I believe it to be the default. We're then going to talk about the action server for CAD file formats, the action server for documents, the action client for CAD files, the action client for parameter refresh and mask properties, and we also have the ability to ignore the action server for certain files. Okay, so on CAD save. If we go into the DDM administration tool, under CAD and neutral files in the navigation, there's a tab called CAD neutral files on user save. And the way that this works is if I look at the example of Solid Edge, when we save a Solid Edge drawing, it will automatically generate a PDF file. And when we save a model, we've got it set to automatically generate a step file for parts but not assemblies. So these are all options. We can do step file, Parasolid, ASYS, STL, 3D PDF, and in the case of Solid Edge we can also generate flat patterns for DXF files. So in the DDM administration tool, on CAD file save we can generate 2D formats and 3D formats. To demonstrate that, I'm going to load a Solid Edge assembly. So this is the same for all of the different supported CAD tools. Creo Parametric, SolidWorks, Solid Edge, Inventor, and IronCAD. If I load this assembly, and I'm using the new Solid Edge interface, so I've loaded this assembly. When I save, I'm going to select everything, select all, overwrite everything, and on the top right hand side here you can see that I'm generating mask properties, neutral files and thumbnail images. So as part of the save process, it will generate my neutral files for me. So this is an option that most customers will be using already. Okay, and that's now finished. So I will close my assembly. That was my example for save neutral files as part of the save process from CAD. Okay, so back to here. If I look at the actions, we finished this particular one. Now, to get into the action server. The action server is the setting on the DDM server. If I open the administration tool, the next option down is your action server. You can enable the action server to be running. You could also set the maximum number of records to process in any one batch. There's an audit capability within here. Service configuration, so the frequency of how often the action server will run, and some start and finish times if you want it to only work between certain hours. There is a log of everything that's processed. Clearly I've been doing some testing and I've got some error messages in here. And also, if it finds files that it cannot generate neutral files for, it will try up to 4 times and then it will mark them so it doesn't keep trying to resolve those issues. In this display here, you can see the various items that it's struggling to create neutral files for, to enable you to go in and investigate and find out why. Most of these are because mine's a demonstration database and it's full of lots of rubbish. Now, action clients. I currently have two different machines acting as action clients. The action server is always the DDM server, but you can run an action client on any number of machines. So it could be run on the DDM server, or you could run it on a separate PC, or you could run it on any of your CAD PCs. And we'll come into that a little bit more later. So this is the action server configuration. Typically, you would just enable it. So, action server for CAD, action server for documents. If we go back here, these are the different settings for the action server for the different supported CAD applications. So, what I'm saying here is for Creo Parametric, I can update 3D refresh parameters. I can specify that I want a PDF for each drawing. I can also specify I want neutral format, 3D neutral formats for the parts and assemblies. You have the ability here that if you only want those generating at a particular status, you can have that setting as well. So if I was to do this, this would only create neutral file formats when drawings, parts and assemblies reach a status of released. I tend to leave it completely open. Now, if you're using the action server, then you typically would not have these settings switched on. And that will make the saving from your CAD application to the server faster because it's doing less work. Okay, so having all of these configured to do the same job would be pointless. Okay, now you can set your options for all of these tools for, and it's typically all the same. There's a button at the top here that says show quantity to process, and at the moment there are no outstanding neutral files that need to be generated. So this is where you set your settings for the action server for the supported CAD applications. In the case of documents, we have an integration with a product called Folder Mill, and we'll come on to that in a minute. Okay, so let me just hop back here for CAD, and we'll see the product working when we go to the action client. But that is where you configure the action server. This is configuring the for documents as well. Now, before we move on to seeing the action client working, what I am going to do is within my project folder here, I have a document that is work in progress, and it has a PDF attachment, which is what we're seeing in the preview pane. How do we generate these automatic PDF previews? Okay, I'm going to go to my my DDM demo server because I have the action client configured to run on this machine. If I look inside here, the action client for this machine, let me rerun this as administrator. You have to log into this part, running it as a system administrator. Okay, so the action client on this machine has got the convert documents to PDF switched on. There's an input folder, an output folder, and an errors folder. You can also set it to run at certain times if you need to. Now, this is using the tool called Folder Mill, okay, which I mentioned earlier. And that tool, if I open it here, is a tool that we do not sell this tool, and we do not support the tool, but DDM has the ability to communicate with this tool. So Folder Mill is the engine that creates the PDF. All we do is present it with a file, and we take the PDF back and we bring it into the database. So let's demonstrate and see what happens there. I'm going to close Folder Mill. It doesn't need to be running with the UI open, but this is the action client that must be running and open on the machine that you're using to generate your neutral files. If I go back to DDM, I'm going to remove the PDF from this document. So it's got an attachment that's the PDF. I'm going to remove it. And if I bring back the server so we can see the server, what you will see is every 60 seconds, the action client will interrogate the database and look for any files that do not have a PDF attachment. And 1 minute seems like a long time when you're waiting. Right, the tool is now running and it's found document 34157 and it's processing it. And therefore, when we go back to the DDM Office client, we will see that there is a PDF neutral attachment. I suspect it's already done by now. If I go back, click away and click back on, I now have a PDF file, and the PDF file was created at 18 minutes past 2, which is my local time, so it's just been generated. So that happens automatically. If we take a look at the settings for that, and we go into the admin tool, okay, this is the action client. If we look at the action server settings for other documents, I'm asking it to do Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Adobe Photoshop. This folder mill engine can also support other file formats. So I've said here, I also want text files, email message files, JPEGs, PNGs, and DWG files. So all of those file formats can also be converted into PDF. Okay, on the folder mill website, there is a list of supported file formats. So to summarize the documents, we don't generate PDFs of documents natively within DDM. We use an external third-party tool as the engine to create the PDF. All we do is we exchange that data to and from in and out of DDM. Okay, so we're now going to move on and look at the action client for CAD files. Now I've actually configured that to run locally on this PC. So this is not running on the server, it's running on my local computer. Again, I'm going to run the DDM admin tool as a system administrator because it makes changes that need those permissions. I'm generating Creo neutral files. This is my Creo version and this is where the executable file is. I'm not using any custom timing. For SolidWorks I'm running 2024, Solid Edge 2023, IronCAD 23 and Inventor 23. So this, my workstation, my local computer, has been configured so that the action client will generate neutral files not on the server. Okay, and I've only chosen simple options. For example, for Solid Edge, we only want a PDF of a drawing and a step of the part. So let's see that in action. If I edit this window, let me just do this to edit. At the top, it pops up and says you've modified this. You need to save your changes. It will automatically start the action client on this machine. So when I say save, it can't because it's already running. So I'm going to close it. Okay. And I've now saved my settings and it restarts this tool. So I'm now running the action client on my local computer, not on the server. So it will run on either. It can run on any number of machines. In order to generate CAD neutral files, it must have access to a CAD license, i.e. a floating CAD license to run in this way. You can see here that it's found 7 Solid Edge files that don't have neutral attachments, and it's kicked off and is automatically using Solid Edge to generate those neutral file formats for me. I did some testing earlier and I wasn't expecting it to do this, so let's just let this finish off. Okay, so for my demonstration for CAD files, what I'd like to do is I have an inventor part here, and the inventor part has an attachment of a step file. I'm going to stop this tool from running. I'm going to remove the step file from the inventor part. If I then rerun this and start this tool, it will scan the database and identify, based on my settings, that there's an inventor file. It's started inventor, it's generated the neutral file, and it's closed inventor for me. Okay, so I'm going to step through and do that for each of the supported CAD applications. Let me do this. So if I select away and go back, we now have a 3D step file generated today at 23 minutes past the hour. I'm going to do the same for Creo, for Solid Edge, and say remove. Start the action client, and it will fire up and do the same for Solid Edge within a minute's time. Okay, there's Solid Edge, there's the file, generates the neutral step file, closes it down, vault it into the database. If I stop, go back, there's the step file. Creo, remove, restart the action client. It will identify a missing step file, load Creo, generate the neutral file, and close Creo. So it's a very efficient way of having your neutral files generated in the background. If you have a large number of users, you want them to be saving as quickly as possible, and therefore this is a good option, but it does need access to a CAD license. So we're starting Creo. I'm not on the network, so it failed to pick up my license. Apologies for that. Let me just do this. So connect, picking up a Creo license. Okay, so it will probably start Creo again and try to do the same thing in a second. Let's just let this finish out and let that run again, because I will assume that it hasn't created the step file. No, it hasn't. So it will identify it's missing again, start Creo. Yeah. Yeah, I'm picking up a network license for Creo. And there we go. So if I click away from this and go back, Creo now has the step file. Let's do the same for IronCAD. It's going to run again. It's starting IronCAD. It'll generate my neutral file and close it down. I know I don't need to demonstrate all of them, but just to make sure that we're covering all of the supported CAD applications. If it's processing many files, it doesn't start the CAD application each time. It will start it, process 150 files, and then restart the CAD application. And the reason we do this is because the CAD applications are not designed to be opening and closing many files, because they run into memory issues. So we limit the number of files to process in any single batch. So we're starting IronCAD, processing the file, and then we close IronCAD. There we go. I'm going to bring DDM back, and we have our step file. The final one is SolidWorks. If I remove the step file like that, the process will run again, load SolidWorks, generate the file, and close it down. While we wait for SolidWorks to kick into life, This is also a very useful tool if you're importing lots of data. The DDM import tool does not automatically generate neutral files as part of the import process. So if you do a large import of data, you can configure and run this tool after the import, and it will go and generate all of your neutral files for you. So it's now running. It will identify a SolidWorks file. Start SolidWorks. There we go. SolidWorks is starting. It'll create my step file for me and then close SolidWorks. There you go, finished. Okay, I'm going to stop that from running. If I go back to here, we've got our step file for SolidWorks. I won't bother doing all of the drawings because I'm just repeating the same thing. So we've covered generating CAD file neutral file formats using the Action client based on the settings on the Action server. The other thing to mention is CAD parameter refresh. If you modify a file, it will mark the file as dirty, and therefore when you load it, it needs to be resaved because it's identified it as a dirty file. So we have the optional ability inside the Action client to update the parameter refresh flag to stop that from happening. So there's only certain situations where you would want to use this parameter refresh, clearing the flag, but it's a very useful one when you do need it. Okay. So that is the clearing of a parameter refresh flag as part of the Action client. The other one is mask properties. If I pick on Solid Edge, we've included the ability within Solid Edge to update mask properties for part assemblies and to limit it to latest issue files only. So as part of our new save window for Solid Edge that we will be doing for all of the other CAD tools, you have the ability to say, don't bother updating the mask properties for me as part of my save. The Action client can do that for you in the background, which again makes the save even faster. If I was to say, generate mask properties, it's telling me that there are 539 files in the database that need their mask properties updating. If I limit it to parts only, there's 437. I don't particularly want that kicking into life and doing all the mask properties for 437 items, so I'm not going to run that. But that's what that option is for. Also, on an import, it doesn't do that as part of the file import. So again, post importing lots or migrating lots of data, you might want to run this tool. The final thing to cover is within DDM, we have the ability to set an option that says ignore the Action server. Why would we want to do this? Well, if I have, for example, let's look in our category browser under parts, purchased items, let's pick on fixings. Okay, well, we can do it for anything. Let's say for bolts and screws. Right, if we're using standard components, these are Inventor button head security screws, we don't need to generate step files of standard fixings. So we could select all of these and we could use the batch update tool, the bulk editor, which we've talked about on a previous workshop. If I just turn this attribute on, which says more Action server ignore. Yes. So I've already set these to say don't bother updating those files with the Action server. And you can set that using the bulk editor to say Action server ignore, set it to yes, and therefore it will ignore it and it won't try and generate neutral files for the files that it doesn't need to. Okay, I'm going to cancel that. Go back to our workshop. Let me just minimize this. So, and let's set that as complete. So today's subject is the action server for generating neutral file formats. We've looked at the on save option from CAD, action server settings for CAD applications, action server settings for documents, and then the action client for CAD files, parameter refresh, mass properties, and the ability to ignore the action server.